A new quarterback name that you just gotta know about.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. Will Oregon have the best defensive line in the Big Ten this year? Some thoughts on the coaching staff, all on today's show, who are working diligently on the recruiting trail. I know Oregon's current recruiting ranking isn't where Duck fans would like it to be. It will improve. Patience is a virtue. I think that's going to kick off today with Messiah Hampton choosing Oregon. If he does not, I will definitely ratchet up the old concern meter. But let's talk quarterbacks because, of course, Oregon is making the quarterback position interesting. So I've mentioned Matt Ponatoski on this show. Oregon offered him a 4-star quarterback considering a variety of schools. They offered him almost immediately following Jared Curtis's picking Georgia over Oregon, the number one quarterback in the class of 2026. Well, now Oregon has really started to spice things up, and you could be thinking, I kind of am, that Oregon might not be getting Matt Ponatoski, and Ryder Lyons is someone they probably view as a 2027 recruit rather than 2026 because he essentially is. So the name of the quarterback that Oregon offered very recently, I'm talking Thursday afternoon, late morning afternoon time, is Bryson Beaver. Now, let's put the name aside and... All right, let's not put the name aside. Let's start with that. I'm curious if you guys think it would be weird rooting for a guy with the name Beaver, or if it would be hilarious if he started for Oregon one day and played against the Bees. I frankly don't know which side of that all-important debate I come down on. I do want to know what you all think. So, Beaver is a 3-star quarterback in the class of 2026. He was committed to Boise State. An Oregon offer came along. He then decommitted from Boise State. So his recruitment is back open. And this seems like a guy who Oregon might kind of keep at an arm's length. And maybe they'll see what Ponatoski does. Maybe they'll see what Ryder Lyons does and feel all that sort of stuff out. And then see if they want to come back. Because I get the sense. You don't offer a scholarship, of course, if you aren't willing to act on it. I think Oregon can get Bryson Beaver at any time that they want. Like the fact that the report of the offer and his ensuing decommitment seemingly came within about an hour of each other, it's usually a little more spread out than that. But the other reason I feel that way is because Oregon is far and away the biggest brand that has offered him a scholarship. So the other schools that have offered Beaver, who's outside the top 1,000 players nationally, he's outside the top 70 in 24/7's quarterback rankings. Like he's 6'2.5", 200 pounds, does not have a high-level recruiting profile. Doesn't mean he can't be a good player one day, but his offer list looks like this. Boise State, Oregon, those are the biggest names by far until the one at the bottom, and I don't think that they're totally interested. There's also Bowling Green, shout out their men's basketball coach, Todd Simon. I know him, awesome guy. Coastal Carolina, the Chanticleers, the most unique mascot maybe in all of college sports. Florida Atlantic, Hawaii, Nevada, Northern Arizona, shout out the Big Sky, San Jose State, UNLV, and Utah. I don't think this is a guy that Utah is going after. So the timing, along with the offer list, makes me think that Beaver was wanting to go to Boise State. Perfectly good place to be. Their current quarterback that just led them to the playoff, Maddox Madsen, is not exactly going to be a first-round pick, nor was he an all-world beater recruit, but he actually beat out a former 5-star recruit who was at USC once upon a time, Malachi Nelson. Some services had Nelson as the top quarterback in the class of 2023, I believe it was. He is now he was top 10 at the very least. He is now probably going to start for UTEP. the Miners. The good old Miners in Conference USA one day will be a part of the Mountain West. But just goes to show you, rankings are just that. They're rankings, hypothetical assessments. Guys get overlooked all the time. You know, one of the lowest rated recruits that Oregon has brought through, or one of the lower, I should say, rated recruits that Oregon has brought through in the last 5-6 years, Marcus Harper. Marcus Harper was a 3-year starter on Oregon's offensive line. So recruiting rankings are just that. Marcus Harper had a better career than Justin Flo. It's the way it goes sometimes. Anyway, Beaver, it would seem to me that if you're committed to play at Boise State, and Oregon comes along with an offer, that's kind of that's a groundbreaking sort of moment. And I understand why he'd back off his commitment. I'm sure he'll still consider the Broncos, and I don't think the Broncos are going to just pull out of his recruitment, because of course they wanted him for a reason. I think they still would. But when you have a school like Oregon throw its hat into the ring, it makes me think that they are not super confident they'll go get Ponitoski. That even if they land Ryder Lyons, they want to have a quarterback for the class of 2026. And the timing of the decommitment makes me think, yeah, if they wanted to get Beaver, they can, but they just don't know where everything else is going to shake out right now. Because Oregon being such an outlier for a quarterback prospect here, I can't remember the last time that's really been the case. Maybe Luke Moga's offer list. I still think Moga was a higher rated recruit, even definitely seen as more of a project, but we saw what that project could look like in the spring game this year. Yeah, Moga's offer list way longer than Beaver's. You have Arizona and Arizona State in there, BYU, Cal, Kansas, Miami, Oregon State, Syracuse, TCU, and a bunch of others as well. So this would be the lowest rated recruit at the quarterback position Oregon has brought in the Dan Lanning era. It would probably be one of the lower rated recruits that's not a walk-on that Oregon's brought in recent memory. Again, doesn't mean that he couldn't be good, but the timing and the sequence of this whole situation was just very, very curious to me, and just makes me think that, if you're Beaver, you have to weigh your options of, okay, do I value being at a school like Oregon that probably has more financial resources and just, a higher level overall program, playing a higher level of football? Do I take my chance there, or do I ultimately go back with Boise State where I have a better chance to be a starting quarterback? Because, if Beaver comes in the class of 2026, the earliest he could probably start 2028. That'd probably be the early, because you've got Dante Moore, of course, probably for 25 and 26. Then in 27, you're probably looking at Luke Moga or Achilles Smith Jr. And would those guys only start for 1 year? Don't really know. So the timeline for when he'd be able to come through and actually start for the Ducks would be challenging. But some guys are okay going to a higher level school, being a backup, getting experience, and then going elsewhere, to kind of use the cachet of being at a big school to go and start somewhere else. You look at Steve Angeli at Syracuse, was at Notre Dame for the last couple of years. I'm sure he went there thinking he could start, but he was a backup. He hasn't really started a game. He played sparingly throughout the season and a little bit in the playoff, and Syracuse said, yeah, we need a starting quarterback. Why don't you come over here? So maybe he try and take that particular route, but interesting to say the least. I want to know all of your thoughts. Drop them in the comments below. Hit me up on Twitter, all that good stuff. I love Oregon's defensive line. Love the defensive line for a second year in a row. Best in the Big Ten? Well, first, this episode brought to you by Monarch Money. Do you ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It is a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. All-in-one convenience is what they are all about. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, even plan long-term goals. So everything you want finance-wise, Monarch's got you covered. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. Check them out at monarchmoney.com. Busy on Friday. Busy on a Friday. So, this continues to be perhaps the greatest thing I have ever come up with, and it's Spencer's Scale of Agreement, or SSA for short. You submit a take, thought, question, anything like that. I give you 1 to 10 how much I agree with it, 1 being not at all. A rare 0 can get thrown out there, 10 being, yeah, I'm full-throated attack mode there. So, this came from a Locked On Ducks insider. I have an SSA for you. Oregon will have the best defensive line / front in the Big Ten with TFL, sacks, and rushing yards allowed. They will have a top 10 defensive front in all of college football for 2026. I do think you have to consider the schedule here when analyzing the second part of this question, because if you're just speaking statistically, Oregon does not have a cakewalk schedule. They certainly don't have a gauntlet schedule either. I think a driving force behind their win total being tied for the highest in all of college football, FanDuel doesn't really put out 11.5 win totals in a 12-game season. Oregon's win total is 10.5 for the second straight year. Last year, of course, they went over and went 12-0, as I and many others predicted them to do. Last year's schedule, tougher than this year's schedule. And this year's team, not quite as good, I don't think, as last year's team. But so you balance those things out, and FanDuel's letting you put your money on either side of exactly the same number there. So when you consider the schedule, that's of course going to impact what sort of stats you put up. If Oregon doesn't play Ohio State last year, how much better do their defensive numbers look? Pretty significantly. He gave up over 30 points in both of those games. Will Howard went for over 300 yards in both of those games. Pretty sure he did in the Rose Bowl. I don't look at the stats or think about that game very often. But so best defensive line in the Big Ten and front. I mean, you got Bryce Betcher and Devin Jackson at the linebacker level. That's pretty darn good. Big Ten with TFL, sacks, and rushing yards allowed, top 10 in all of college football. Let me put a 5. Let me put a 5 on this. The reason that I'm a little soft on that one is not because I don't love Oregon's front. I do. And I said last year, all last season, going into it, throughout the year, and I think they lived up to the billing. That was the best defensive front Oregon has had since 2014. Might be the best one of all time. I mean, it had 1 first-round pick on it that we know of, probably a second one loading up here in Mateo. But if Mateo takes another jump forward, you bring in Bear Alexander from USC, who is definitely not proven to be a guy that can hit his ceiling. If he does, mega talent. I am chair of the Amari Washington fan club. Tatum Tuioti, a third year. And then you've got a bunch of depth behind him. It's all 4- and 5-star recruits. So I love where the front is at, to be sure. I don't want to overlook what the Big Ten does year in and year out. Frankly, a sleeper in this conversation is Iowa. Iowa's defense, I have my own opinions and jokes that I make about Iowa, of course, but because who the heck doesn't? But Iowa's defense is not just good and really good statistically every year. They're like good every year. The problem is their offense is just inept, completely incapable. But their defense, if put onto certain teams over the years, think like USC 2022 with Caleb Williams and Lincoln Riley's first year, that's a national championship caliber team. Full stop. So when you're in a conference with Iowa and Ohio State is reloading, just like Oregon is, Michigan lost a bunch of guys, is still going to have a lot of talent. Isaiah Hole of Locked On Wolverines is really confident about what they have up there. I think that, I put a 5 on this because I think it is just as likely to happen as not happen. Because you have 2 things in there. You're kind of parlaying a couple of takes. They'll lead the Big Ten with TFL, sacks, and rushing yards allowed. That is asking a lot to lead in all of those categories. Does Oregon have the talent to do it? Yeah, the maximum talent level of Oregon's front four and their linebackers as well can certainly do that. I think top 10 defensive front in all of college football for 26 is more likely than leading the Big Ten in those three categories. But I gave that one a 5. Gabe sends this one in. I love Mateo, but I don't think he's going to be a top 10 pick. Ooh, seems like that tends to be more speed edge rushers, and barring him proving otherwise at the combine, I don't think Mateo is that type of edge. I could still see first round, though. Is that a hot take? Well, I could still see first round is a hot take. Like, he's a first round pick. He's definitely not as fast as Kayvon Thibodeau off the edge. He has a lot of high-end NFL traits. He just does. The versatility of pass rush moves, that kind of load and step. He does have good bend coming around the corner. He's not a Kenny Rose speed rusher off the edge where he runs around and tackle a lot. He kind of can, but he is a blend of power and speed that I think the NFL wants. So, top 10, yeah, it's a high bar. A lot of talented guys in college football. I'm putting a 2 on that one because I do think he should be a top 10 pick. Duck the Rules says, out of our stacked wide receiver room, the biggest emergence or surprise player this year will be Kyler Kasper. Why, you ask? Just a gut feeling. Well, first of all, I respect the gut feeling. I mean, that's how I do a lot of things sometimes. I get as numbers driven as I possibly can when I'm on the golf course. But sometimes I just have a gut feeling, no, that's not the right club. It's got to be this one. I do that all the time. I did that earlier today, playing golf with my dad and my brother, and I will do that again tomorrow. So I get the gut feeling sort of thing. The biggest emergence will be Kyler Kasper. You know what? I'm going to put a 6 on that. I'm going to put a 6, more likely than not, just slightly, because this is a guy who last year, it's really easy to forget because a lot of the exciting stuff and the best parts of Oregon season and the best football Oregon played came after this stretch. But if you go back and watch the first about 4 games, I don't remember exactly the game he got injured. I know he played in the UCLA game. He had a role in this receiving core. It was a specialized role because he's 6'5", and Oregon doesn't have another 6'5" receiver. But this is a guy who drew 1 or 2 pass interference penalties in the end zone. I think one of them came against UCLA, and I think there was another one against Oregon State. I could be remembering that wrong. But there was a role for him to play that was just for him. I don't see why he wouldn't have at least that role again. Now you remove Evan Stewart from the equation with his injury, and Kyler Kasper is going into his 4th year of college football. It's one of the reasons that, the 2 names that jumped to my mind first for replacing Evan Stewart's production were Gary Bryant Jr. and Justice Lowe. Not just because, Lowe is, from a body type standpoint, really, really similar to Evan Stewart. And, guys that have been through the receiver room like Tez Johnson and others have always spoke in incredibly glowing terms about Justice Lowe. And we saw glimpses of that a season ago. But Lowe is going into his 4th season of college football. You think about a guy like Jurion Dickey, he's going into his 3rd. He's really going into his 2nd because his first one was all but lost to injury. So this is really his 2nd full season of college football. He could be a guy that breaks out there, to be sure. But knowledge of the playbook, having your body type ready, and, does he have a ton of game experience? No, but he's got some. He made that big catch against Idaho, and then he didn't have a ton of targets after that, but yeah, I mean, he is able to stand out from everybody else. No one else is 6'5" with that frame. I've answered questions on this show before. I don't think they're going to do it, but I've answered questions on this show before about whether Kyler Kasper is going to make the switch to be a tight end. He could. If he put on a bunch of weight, I don't see why he could. I don't think that that's the direction that they're going or the direction they feel they need to go, but yeah, give me a 6. Give me a solid 6 on that one from Duck the Rules. Love the takes. Keep them coming. This is just becoming my favorite part of the summer. My favorite part of the summer. Truly it is. Just doing Spencer Scale of Agreement all over the place. I love that you guys are into it too. So, is the House settlement just out there to get Oregon? Where do we rank guys on the coaching staff? That's all coming up next. All right, let's get to a question about the House settlement, and then we'll close with some coaching staff talk, and then one of the most unique questions that I've ever gotten. 93 Aguiar, I think I pronounced that right. Maybe it's supposed to be Aguilar, and I missed an L. I don't know. Are the new House rules targeting Oregon? Answer: no. No, they're not. Do the new rule, which may or may not actually stay in place. I don't know if you guys have kept up with this sort of stuff. Obviously, I do because Locked On College Football. But the first of what it's expected to be several lawsuits against the new House settlement has already been brought. I don't know if there will be a ton more, but the one that has arrived is one that I frankly expected, and it's on Title IX grounds, arguing, hey, you're now going to have athletic departments paying money in an inequitable fashion, and everything is supposed to be a 50-50 split between men's and women's sports. So I don't know how long that's going to take to go out in the courts, but that's kind of the latest. And then there will be legal challenges, and I bet you they will win, to the NIL Go Commission that's trying to regulate the NIL stuff. But no, I get where you're coming from with, man, Oregon's got a bunch of money and Oregon's got a huge brand and whatnot. Are they just trying to rein? They're not specifically trying to rein in Oregon. Or is Oregon one of dozens of schools that, people that are trying to regulate this stuff? And I don't think they're wrong for wanting to do that, by the way. Is Oregon one of, dozens of schools that has that level of money that makes people go, hey, we can't just have this be a completely, unregulated Wild West sort of market. There is no other area in American life, or frankly anywhere in the world, that is effective with this little amount of regulation and structure. So no, I don't think the rules are specifically made just to screw Oregon or just to hold Oregon back or stop them from doing anything like that. If Oregon were, not spending at the levels that it has been and will continue to do, then this all still would have come down. So just to be clear, no, this is not a specific target at Oregon. All right, Bud sends in a couple here. Let me get the unique one out of the way first. He said, if there was a Mount Rushmore of Oregon Duck athletes known by a singular name, who would be on your list? Mine, Joey, Marcus, Sabrina. That's, of course, Steve Prefontaine and Joey Harrington with Marcus and Sabrina. So I'm going to keep this to athletes that I've actually watched in my life. That's a general rule that I have on the show. When you don't watch someone from an athlete standpoint, it's harder to talk about them. It's hard for me to compare MJ and LeBron. Why? I didn't watch Michael Jordan play. I've watched LeBron my whole life, obviously, but I didn't watch Michael Jordan play. So I don't know how it truly feels. But for me in my lifetime, there just haven't been as many that have been only known by one name. So I've got LaMichael, Marcus, Sabrina, and Kenyon. LaMichael and Kenyon were staples of my childhood, quite frankly. So Bud's other question. After Dan Lanning, rank Oregon's football coaches in terms of both importance and quality, including the strength and conditioning coach, Wilson Love. Well, no disrespect to Coach Love. Not that he isn't important. Every coach is important. That is of course the case. I'd have him last just because I think it's easier to find quality strength and conditioning coaches out there. They're not all created equal. By all accounts, Wilson Love is really good. Do I, as an outsider, notice the difference as much from Aaron Feld to Wilson Love? No. Do I think Wilson Love is awesome? Yeah. There are clips of him and from last season running up and down the sideline, firing guys up. That's what a strength and conditioning coach does. Right above him, I'd have, because you put importance in there as a qualifier, I'd have Joe Lorig, the special teams coach. Special teams matter a great deal. I talk about them when asked here on the show. I definitely value their contribution. I was glad when Joe Lorig got hired because Oregon special teams in Dan Lanning's first year were not good enough, and Dan Lanning knew that. They have since gotten significantly better. Are they as important as position groups to play a lot more snaps? No. So he's lower on the list. Right above him, I'm of course going from bottom to top, Drew Maringer, the tight ends coach, who I think is solid. I don't think he's now he's of course got Kendra Harrison committed, recruited Kenyon Sadiq. There have been some other, pretty notable misses on the recruiting trail from a tight end standpoint. Again, I think Maringer's solid. I think the production that has come out of that position group in the last few years has been good. So I think he's up, but also importance. Tight ends, not that it's a position that doesn't matter. I talk about it just like I talk about every other position group. However, generally speaking, losing a tight end can hurt your offense, but not as much as some other positions. So right above him, I'd have Ross Douglas. Now, Douglas could go up on this list a lot depending on how things go. And Douglas being here is kind of a placeholder because he's taken over for Junior Adams, who's set the bar really, really high. So if in the next year or two, Douglas is in this position after coming over from Syracuse and the recruiting is not as good or the output isn't quite as good, and the output he had at Syracuse with the receiver room, I don't think there's going to be an issue there. But we'll see what happens on the recruiting front. Hopefully, by the time you're listening to or watching this show, Messiah Hampton is committed to the Ducks. That's something I fully expect to take place. So I don't really know on Ross Douglas, but I have to see what he brings to the table as a recruiter before I'd be able to rank him higher. Brian Michalowski, B-Mike, as Tristan Phillips called him when he was here on the show a while back, coaches the linebackers. Production, incredibly solid. Recruiting, incredibly solid. He's just solid. Across the board. He is fantastic. Above him, I have Tosh Lupoy. And the reason is that his importance as a defensive coordinator is very, very high. And Dan Lanning's a defensive-minded coach, being a former DC himself. And I, always say any chance I get, just because a coach comes from one side of the ball doesn't mean he's uninvolved with the other side of the ball. But I have Lupoy here as a recruiter, top tier. I mean, he really, really is top tier. In the last few years, when Oregon's lost its biggest games, the defense has not been good enough. So if that's the next step for Dan Lanning and Tosh Lupoy defensively, is they have made this defense better, no question. But in the biggest games, you got to find a way to hold a team under 30 points. They haven't done that. Every playoff team they played last year scored over 30. Got to be better in the big games. Above Tosh Lupoy, co-defensive coordinator and DB's coach Chris Hampton, who will be a defensive coordinator one day. He might be gone from Oregon after this year. We'll just see how the coaching cycle goes. But he just brought in the best Oregon Hall of defensive back recruits of all time, and he was the 24/7 recruiter of the year. So I had to put him pretty high on the list, so I've got him 3. Right ahead of him is Rashad Samples, who hasn't had Samples might be a touch high. However, Samples was the one involved in landing the highest rated receiver recruit and second highest overall player in the history of Oregon football, and DeCorian Moore. That could be a slight overrate. Samples should probably be below Hampton. I'll swap those two. Hampton's 2, Samples is 3, but number 1 is Will Stein. Number 1 is absolutely because his importance as the highest ranking offensive head coach, and he's the play caller, and he's the quarterback's coach. There are some staffs that have an OC and a quarterback's coach, and plenty of places combine them. Some places separate, have 2 guys. Stein does both, goes out and recruits really, really well. I think he's underrated amongst Oregon fans in terms of his recruiting chops. And, I mean, the production that he has on the field, the importance as the offensive play caller, with Dan Lanning being a former defensive coordinator, like you just... the importance and quality, everything that he does, Stein is definitely number 1 in my book. So that's where we end the weekend. Hopefully when I come back, we've got commits to talk about. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day and a great weekend. And go Ducks.